This week on English Bites, it's plants and gardens. In today's episode, we go to Queensland to find out about some very old and delicious Australian foods. They're called bush foods, the native plants of Australia that have been eaten for thousands of years, and they're becoming more popular again. Let's look at some of these delicious bush foods.
For centuries, bush food plants have been an integral part of the Indigenous people's staple food. It's been estimated that there are upwards of 5,000 different bush food plant species right across Australia, so the Aboriginal people had a secure and very diverse supply of interesting food. There's been an incredible resurgence in the growing and use of bush tucker plants, and a lot of that interest is brought about by people who are passionate about the growing and those who know how to use them. I've come to a nursery at Kenilworth behind Queensland's Sunshine Coast where there's a couple who are passionate about it. Graham White and Veronica Coogan. G'day. Graham, how did you get interested in bush tucker plants?
Well, Kyle, about 7 years ago, Ronnie and I developed our interest in bush foods by incorporating bush foods in revegetation plantings that we were doing in the Sunshine Coast. And we noticed a growing interest in the public about bush foods. So one thing led to another, and the bush food nursery grew from there. If you treat them as a fruit tree and not as a native plant, and give them a little bit of care and attention as you would a normal fruit tree, they'll reward you with a bountiful harvest.
I bet you'll never guess. There are two things that I like better than gardening, and one of them's eating. And Dale Scott is just the lady to fill me up with some wonderful tucker.
Hi, Colin.
How are you?
Oh,
Dale,
well.
You're an Indigenous lady. What tribe do you come from?
I'm from Cooma Tribal Lands in Durrumbandi.
Dale, how do you go about using all these things you've got on the table?
All right. The paper bark here, I wrap damper and whole fish in that and either put it into a hot oven or put it onto your barbecue. Little bits of oil seeps out into the dish itself and imparts a bit of a flavour.
What about the lime?
This lime here is a large native lime, very nice in cool drinks, marmalades and squeezed over your seafood.
What about the leaves?
These are lemon myrtle leaves, very, very high in oil content. As you can see, they're very glossy. And these are used dry, fresh or ground. This one here is the ground lemon myrtle. So that's the leaf that's been ground up.
What about that brown stuff?
Oh, that's wattle seed. That's roasted wattle seed. These are beautiful. Tastes like hazelnut, coffee and chocolate. But a lot of our native herbs and spices are much stronger than the domesticated ones that we have, and therefore only use a little bit at a time until you really get used to it.
Okay, so in the story, we met some people who are farming bush foods and someone else who cooks them. They're on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. That's an area about an hour's drive north of Brisbane. How many different types of bush foods are there in Australia?
It's been estimated that there are upwards of 5,000 different bush food plant species right across Australia, so the Aboriginal people had a secure and very diverse supply of interesting food.
There are upwards of 5,000 different bush food plants. Upwards of here means more than or greater than. When it's a suffix, wards is pronounced woods. It means in the direction of, upwards, downwards, sidewards. Okay, so there are more than 5,000 different Australian plants you can eat. He says that the Aboriginal people had a secure and diverse supply of interesting food. Secure means safe, and diverse means varied or of different types. It's a word you'll hear a lot when people are talking about plants. So the supply of food before Europeans came to Australia was safe, and there were many different kinds of food to eat. Most non-Aboriginal Australians didn't know much about bush food for many years. Recently, more people have started enjoying them. Let's meet some people who are now farming bush foods.
G'day. Graham, how did you get interested in bush tucker plants?
Notice that the reporter speaks in a very informal way with a strong Australian accent. He says, "G'day," a common way of greeting people. He asks how Graham became interested in bush tucker plants. Tucker is a slang Australian expression for food, and there are many others. We can eat tucker, chow, grub, or nosh. Okay, so bush tucker plants are bush food plants. Listen again.
G'day. Graham, how did you get interested in bush tucker plants?
Well, Kyle, about 7 years ago, Ronnie and I developed our interest in bush foods by incorporating bush foods in revegetation plantings that we were doing in the Sunshine Coast. And we noticed a growing interest in the public about bush foods.
They started incorporating or mixing bush foods in revegetation plantings. Revegetation is the process of bringing back plants to an area. They were trying to replant native plants and started using some bush food plants as well. And they noticed a growing interest from the community. So they're the people who grow bush food. Let's meet someone who cooks it.
Dale Scott is just the lady to fill me up with some wonderful tucker.
Hi, Colin.
Dale Scott is just the lady to fill him up with some wonderful tucker. To fill someone up means to feed them full of food, to completely satisfy them. Let's look at some of that bush tucker.
All right, the paper bark here, I wrap damper and whole fish in that and either put it into a hot oven or put it onto your barbecue.
Dale is showing the paper bark. Paper bark is an Australian native tree that has bark as thin as paper. It's easy to peel off the bark. She uses the bark to wrap up fish and damper. Damper is an Australian bush bread that's made from flour and water. When you're out camping or out in the bush, you can cook it on a stick in a fire or in a camp oven. But Dale cooks it in a hot oven or on the barbecue. Here are some other bush foods.
This lime here is a large native lime, very nice in cool drinks, marmalades and squeezed over your seafood.
She's got a large native lime. It's very nice in cool drinks and marmalades. Marmalade is jam made from citrus fruits. Citrus fruits are oranges, lemons, grapefruits and limes. So these are a native citrus, native limes. They're also nice squeezed over seafood.
What about that brown stuff?
Oh, that's wattle seed. That's roasted wattle seed. These are beautiful. Tastes like hazelnut, coffee and chocolate.
The brown stuff is wattle seeds. Wattle seeds taste like hazelnut, coffee and chocolate. Sounds like some delicious bush tucker. And if you'd like to know more about bush tucker and other Australian foods, just go to our website. You're sure to be filled up with all sorts of English language tips. English Bites is brought to you by Australia Network. And there are many other English language learning resources available at our website.